The King's Avatar, Chapter 1701 in Spoken Understanding. Audio source, wuxia-world-audiobook.com. Chapter 1701, in Spoken Understanding. Translator, Noam Yummy. Editor, Noam Yummy. Steamed Bun Invasion Charge Forth. What attack would he execute? Everyone was rather curious and eager to see what he would do, all turning their attention to him. Even Sun Shang didn't dare let his guard down. Steamed Bun's skill level was very volatile, hard to gauge or comment on, but it wasn't someone anyone should ignore. Currently, One Autumn Leaf was airborne, but being airborne wasn't the same as being stunned. He could still attack and move to an extent. He was getting closer and closer. Steamed Bun Invasion lunged forwards with his fists raised, yet, under the eyes of the watching crowd, he didn't strike. What was he waiting for? Everyone wondered to themselves, watching as Steamed Bun Invasion rushed closer and then street riot. What the fuck? Everyone cursed in their hearts. What was he waiting for? He was waiting to close the distance. A powerful skill unleashed just like that, in your face, with no cover or prep. He just ran up to his target and used it. The pro players were completely speechless. How low level, how noobish. However, this was exactly what the players of Samsara had not been watching out for. They focused on Steamed Bun Invasion, wary of his next move, yet he didn't make a move. He just ran and then when he got close, he used a powerful skill. A low-level move, yet on this high-end stage, it had become a feint that managed to trick everyone. No one would have guessed that Steamed Bun Invasion's movements were so simple and straightforward, actually just running up and unleashing a powerful skill. What an embarrassment. All the pro players held their heads in their hands. It was they who had let such a player appear on this ultimate, final stage. It was their fault for not managing to eliminate him in an earlier round. When up against this guy, you can't face him with the same state of mind you would have in a normal match, someone was saying. Steamed Bun had played quite a few matches this season, and there were many of pro players that had the experience of facing him. His unpredictability was something known and tested. However, not using the usual state of mind you'd have towards matches was an easy thing to say, but if not your usual state, then what state should you use? Steamed Bun's strange thought processes weren't something you could deal with by finding the right state. If you treated him as a noob, then that would be a mistake you'd definitely regret making. But if you treated him like a pro player, just look now, he managed to get the advantage through a distinctly non-pro action. This guy switched freely between playing like a noob and like a pro. There really wasn't anyone who could keep up with his rhythm. Follow your own rhythm, don't focus too much on his actions. Isolate him. Mark him. Pincer. The pro players were all talking amidst themselves, as though how to deal with Steamed Bun's weirdness were an academic discussion topic. Steamed Bun wasn't exactly a top-tier player, but he also wasn't someone easy to deal with either. Many had fallen to his unpredictability. Though his instability might negatively affect his team, in a life-and-death match like this, they couldn't place their bets on an unknown. What if he was hiding a secret weapon or something just for this match? It wasn't like that hadn't happened before. The pro players had yet to come up with a conclusion from their discussion. Meanwhile, Steamed Bun Invasion Street Riot was taking the spotlight on the field. All sorts of low to mid-level brawler skills being unleashed in a mindless torrent. From the rate at which he was dishing out attacks, it was clear that his technical skill was nothing to laugh at. Zhou Zekai's Cloud Piercer could still pull away and avoid it, but Sun Zhang's One Autumn Leaf wasn't so fortunate. Originally, being airborne wouldn't have been much trouble for One Autumn Leaf. He had kept his focus on what Steamed Bun was going to try when he ran over, yet the other didn't do anything. When One Autumn Leaf finally landed, quick recovering and about to get up and continue fighting, Steamed Bun Invasion's powerful skill was launched. Bricks, sand, inject poison, paralysis needle. All sorts of skills and items came raining down on one autumn leaf, with punches and kicks interweaved between. A level 70 skill wasn't easy to deal with, and Sun Xiang was rapidly beaten back. After one autumn leaf's quick recovery, he didn't manage to actually get up, rolling on the ground to try and dodge the assault. Zhou Zikai, having pulled his cloud piercer out of the way, looked back and realized that his evasive maneuvers had been a little too excessive. Steamed Bun had been completely locked onto one autumn leaf, and Street Riot's skills were all directed at him. Not a single one came for Cloud Piercer. However, if Cloud Piercer had been in his original position, then that might have been a different matter. Zhou Zikai knew to look at things from different sides, and didn't underestimate Steamed Bun's decision. No matter if it was a coincidence or chance, he would treat it as if it were intended. However, he wasn't able to support Sun Xiang at the moment. As soon as his Cloud Piercer stepped back, Yishu's Lord Grim immediately darted in, cutting him off from one autumn leaf. Then Lord Grim closed in, attacked, not giving him an opening to come to Sun Jiang's aid. By now, Tang Ru's soft mist had managed to recover from the impact of that snipe. She threw herself back into the fray without hesitation, charging at one autumn leaf. For a moment, the players of both teams were paired up in one-on-one fights without any cooperation happening. It seemed to have no tactical elements. However, from what the players were attempting to do, it was possible to find tactical intent. Su Muchung's Dancing Rain kept trying to edge over to this side. She clearly didn't want to continue dueling Zhang Boteo one-on-one. She hoped to play on her strengths, using her abilities to support the entire team in combat. Zhang Boteo, responsible for marking her, felt a little helpless. Empty Wave's attacks weren't able to lock Dancing Rain down completely. It wasn't to say that Zhang Boteo's mechanics or ability wasn't good enough, it was a limit of the class he played. Spell blades did high single target damage, but it was hard to chain skills. So against him, Dancing Rain still had room to maneuver. All Zhang Boteo could do was to try his best to stop Su Muchung from reuniting with her teammates, but he couldn't lock her down completely, so she was still managing to slowing edge over. The cannon swung around. Su Muchung's Dancing Rain had finally entered the range at which she could provide support. Immediately, she sent a missile over to help Tang Ru and Steamed Bun's offensive, making things even harder for Sun Xiang, who was fighting 1 against 2. 1 against 3, huh? Dancing Rain's offensive support cannon fire was a nightmare for Sun Xiang. He wasn't having a good time against his current 2 opponents. One was fierce and fearless, the other unpredictable and strange. The two had completely different styles, and didn't even attack with the same rhythm. They were basically ignoring each other as they fought. Even so, it wasn't easy for Sun Xiang to deal with. The two weren't consciously attempting to synchronize and act cooperatively, but they seemed to have a kind of unspoken understanding between them. Tang Ru and Steamed Bun had started from zero and gotten here fighting and growing side by side. They had never purposefully tried to develop any sort of tacit understanding and cooperation. It had formed naturally. It was something even they themselves probably couldn't describe or explain. Why did they have such habits in combat? It was because they were used to having each other present when fighting. Their understanding and tacit teamwork was all completely subconscious. If even they didn't realize it, then how would their opponents be able to see it? WuxiaWorldAudio.com. So it seemed like the two weren't cooperating at all, yet they were just extremely hard to deal with. This duo is a rather strange one. The pro players started thoughtfully discussing amongst themselves again, as if the doors to a new land had opened for them. Tang Ru and Steamed Bun, a duo that seemed to have no method or organization to their teamwork, yet there was a strange, indescribable feeling there. For a moment, none of them knew how to explain it. Usually, for a team offensive, you would try to mess up their rhythm, thus reducing their combative ability. However, from the very beginning, they never had a shared rhythm to their actions. Wang Jieshi said, primarily aiming to share his observations to his tiny herb teammates. That's why Sun Shang can't find an opening right yet that when Blue Rain's Huangshe Ocean butt in. Not at the moment, but who knows what will happen? Wang Jieshi said. Tang Ru and Steamed Bun's teamwork was vague, uncertain, so he wasn't sure if they would be able to keep Sun Shang suppressed, or if Sun Shang would soon find an opening. However, currently, it seemed like Sun Shang no longer need to find any opening. Samsara's sixth player, Du Ming's Moon Luring Frost had arrived. Triple slash. Moon Luring Frost charged in, slashing thrice with his blade, once at Soft Mist, once at Steamed Bun Invasion, and with the last, he changed directions. Moon Luring Frost left. The first two slashes of Triple Slash seemed like he was just harassing them as he passed by, while the last one had Soft Mist, who had turned to attack him, striking air. Dancing Rain. Moon Luring Frost ended up charging in her direction, standing in the way of her cannon fire. Su Mucheng rapidly regained her supportive maneuvers, but Samsara wasn't willing to let her do as she wished. Though Zhang Boteo's marking was effective to some degree, it was still limited and full of openings due to his class. If they wanted to properly lock Su Mucheng down, then they would have to do as they were doing before and have a melee class close in and keep her occupied. This was the reason why Du Ming only spent a moment helping Sun Shang. However, he did pull off a successful feint. The two attacks from Triple Slash had everyone thinking he was about to fight at Sun Zhang's side. However, no one had expected him to dart away as Tang Ru went to deal with him. He's coming at me. Du Ming's true intentions were exposed and Su Mucheng immediately prepared herself. However, while Happy only just found out about Du Ming's intentions, Samsara had already discussed it. Zhang Boteo had already made preparations. The skills that Empty Waves was saving were suddenly unleashed in a torrent. Why did spell blades have a hard time chaining their attacks? On one hand, their skills weren't as fast to activate as close-ranged classes' skills were. Another point was that their skills had relatively longer cooldowns. It wasn't impossible to unleash a rapid barrage of skills, but after you were done, all the skills would be on cooldown, and how would they defend against their enemy's counterattack then? However, Zhang Boteo didn't care about that at this moment. He used this wave of skills to try and lock down Dancing Rain's movements, giving Moon Luring Frost a chance to close in. Under each team's tactical efforts, the two sides finally launched into a much more tactically minded face-off. Lord Grim and Cloud Piercer's battle was also slowly inching closer to the center of the action, preparing to welcome even more complex variation into the battle. However, in another area of the map, the ongoings seemed to have no relation to this area. Wu Qi, Chao Yifan. These two were currently locked in a one-on-one fight, but it had been a long time since the broadcast had paid them any attention. End chapter.
The King's Avatar, Chapter 1702, Changing the Standard Method. Audio source, wuxia-world-audiobook.com. Chapter 1702, Changing the Standard Method. Translator, Nomyami. Editor, Nomyami. Jiang Botao's empty wave suddenly exploded, firing a series of attacks toward Dancing Rain. Du Ming sees this chance. Cruel Silence is currently flying toward Dancing Rain. Yi Shi's Lord Grim is moving in this direction, but he probably can't block this. Steamed Bun Invasion ambushed. It counts as an ambush, probably. But it was dodged. Charged with surging passion, commentator Pan Lin described these complex battles that were just about to intertwine together. As for the other area of this battlefield, it wasn't that the broadcasters didn't notice it, but compared to this area, the scene that those two players brought wasn't thrilling enough. Sun Xiang's One Autumn Leaf turned to help Zhou Zekai, but before this, he had already cooperated with Wu Qi to establish the route over there. It was like how when the battle first began, the two of them had pincered Su Mucheng's Dancing Rain. This time, the two of them used basically the same method to deal with Qiao Yifan's 1-inch ash. But because Zhou Zekai's situation was more dire, this time, the two of them didn't manage to carry out their plan to the fullest. Sun Qiang had one autumn leaf turn away sooner, leaving Qiao Yifan to Wu Qi alone. At this time, Wu Qi's cruel silence still hadn't completely closed in on 1-inch ash, but he was at least sticking to him very tightly. By now, 1-inch ash basically had no way to demonstrate his Phantom Ghost Blade abilities. Cruel silence was too close. 1-inch ash had no way of stopping to cast a ghost boundary. Qiao Yifan could only run away, run non-stop. He need distance. Dark boundary, ice boundary. These ghost boundaries were all already off cooldown, but he had no space to cast him. But Qiao Yifan didn't panic. He carefully observed everything in front of him now. He knew that, in a simple foot race, he definitely wouldn't be able to escape cruel silence. He had to use the map somehow. Fortunately, Phantom Demons did have a few close-range tricks. Qiao Yifan controlled 1-inch ash to fight as he moved, and at the same time he studied his surroundings in all directions, carefully memorizing everything he saw. Gradually, a plan began to form in his mind. This'll do. Even though Qiao Yifan wasn't sure if his idea would work, he could only give it a try. Close-range fighting wasn't a Phantom Demon's strong suit. Walking and fighting like this, he had already lost quite some health to Wu Qi's cruel silence. Moonlight Slash. 1-inch ash suddenly attacked. It seemed sudden, but he was a Phantom Demon, which only had a few slashing skills. Thankfully, they were all low-level and had short cooldowns, otherwise he'd have run out of moves long ago. Moonlight Slash. This was a skill that 1-inch ash had used who knew how many times already, so no matter how sudden it was, there wasn't any feeling of newness to Wu Qi. Without even thinking, he was already swiftly responding. Turn, move. Cruel Silence's steps were quite large because Moonlight Slash would become full Moonlight Slash. This was a fairly standard method. And full Moonlight Slash would follow the user's controls, usually deflecting toward the direction in which the opponent dodged. So, when dodging Moonlight Slash, one also had to consider the forthcoming full Moonlight Slash as well, and leave some extra space when dodging. If one tried to use something like overlapping sidesteps here, they would definitely be punished. No, Wu Qi had seen through Qiao Yifan's method, but he didn't have any way to break it. This was the worth of the standard method. In order for it to be called standard, it had been refined hundreds and thousands of times. It was a highly used technique. These sorts of techniques had gone through enough testing, such that no matter how good or bad their damage was, they at least put the user in a good position. When up against this kind of technique, no tricks could be pulled. Methods to counter it were simply those that had been determined to be the most effective after many tests. For assassins, this was the large step that Cruel Silence had taken. But this time, after the sword carved out this Moonlight Slash, the light immediately faded. No full Moonlight Slash. But this couldn't be considered surprising. This was a standard method, so of course, all of its variations had been studied as well. Moonlight Slash and full Moonlight Slash were often used consecutively, but that didn't mean that they had to be. However, because of this, often, Moonlight Slash always had to be dodged as though it were two attacks. There was nothing to discuss about that, even if the opponent didn't plan to chain the attacks. If you really treated the Moonlight Slash as just one attack, then it would be very easy for the opponent to make a last-second adjustment and add on a full Moonlight Slash. So, there was no way around it. Even if you knew that this method could be changed in this way, you could only act after the change appeared. Earlier, Qiao Yivan had controlled 1-inch Ash to use Moonlight Slash 3 times, all of which had been followed by a full Moonlight Slash. Very fast, very steady. The solid foundational strikes meant that Wu Qi didn't dare get overconfident, so his performance was also very steady. So this time, the fourth time, Cruel Silence took a large step again, still dodging the Moonlight Slash as though it were 2 attacks. But this time, there was only moonlight, no full. What kind of change would this cause? This was hard to say. After this, there were many options that could be taken. But one point was worth noting. Why was it so common to go from Moonlight Slash to full Moonlight Slash in the first place? It was because connecting these two skills revealed no openings. It was the best guarantee of safety. But when Moonlight Slash was used on its own, this skill seemed a bit frail. Without a full Moonlight Slash, if the opponent reacted quickly enough, if he seized the opening to attack, then the Phantom Demon would be in a bad spot. Wu Qi's reaction was very fast. As soon as he saw the blade stop, he knew that Qiao Yivan was changing things this time. Even though he had experienced the standard method 3 times just earlier, Wu Qi was not stuck in his ways of thinking. Xingcut. As though he had been prepared for this long before, Cruel Silence rushed forward. With such an instantaneous reaction, there was no need to worry about whether Qiao Yivan had purposely controlled 1-inch Ash to delay his attack. With such a fast reaction, even if Qiao Yivan had added this delay in his chained slashes on purpose, this delay had already become an opening. Ding! The sound of the collision rang out. 1-inch Ash's Tachi Snow Stripe successfully blocked Cruel Silence's Xingcut that had carried both man and dagger. WuxaWorldAudio.com. Guard. Qiao Yivan controlled 1-inch Ash to use a sudden guard, blocking the Xingcut that swiftly came at him. Clearly, he had been prepared for this. Not good. This feeling suddenly floated up in Wu Qi's mind. The standard method of Moonlight Slash to full Moonlight Slash, he had been prepared for. Changing it so that Moonlight Slash was no longer followed by full, he instantly changed as well, as fast as he could. But the opponent had been prepared for his immediate offensive. Clearly, Qiao Yivan had predicted this. He knew that Wu Qi would launch a fast attack in response to his change. Guard. Their weapons clashed, but the sound rang for only a moment. In this moment, the two characters had gotten extremely close. On the screen, Wu Qi could see their crossed weapons, and the somewhat gloomy face of his opponent 1-inch Ash. But very soon, that face pulled away from him. The guard blocked his attack, so Cruel Silence came to a stop, but his 1-inch Ash used the guard to slide backward. This was the priority that the system dealt. Wu Qi had no way to interfere with that. But this moment was very short. In the next moment, he was already moving to his next attack. As the shadow follows, raise speed, forcibly follow the target. After recovering, Cruel Silence immediately activated this skill. Behind him stretched a chain of shadows, but in front of him, 2 lines of crossed swordlight flashed out, as though solidified, waiting for Cruel Silence to crash into them. Gore Cross. As the shadow follows could not go through an attack, changing direction and circling around was possible, but this Gore Cross was too close. It had come too quickly. It was too late for him to change direction. He could only cancel the skill. In the end, Cruel Silence forcibly came to a halt, stopping himself in front of the Gore Cross. Having to change direction again, start up again, give chase again. Who knew how much this had slowed him down? But Qiao Yivan evidently wasn't done. As 1-inch Ash seized the chance to slip away, he also sent an earthquake sword toward him. All of this the televised broadcast hadn't shown. but the live audience had the projection, and countless screens above were showing all part of the battle. If the audience wanted to see something, there was no delay at all. Among Samsara's audience, there would of course be Wuchi fans, and right now, they watched as Qiao Yivan used all of these techniques to trap Cruel Silence in place. Even they felt aggrieved. In just these few moments of effort, 1-inch Ash had slipped away behind an unidentifiable structure that was half sunk into the ground. Now, Wuchi didn't dare let Cruel Silence chase right after him. 1-inch Ash had left his line of sight. The next moves would depend entirely on position. Distance was no longer the one indicator of advantage in this situation. Jump up, circle to the front. Two choices dangled in front of Wuchi. End chapter. The King's Avatar. Chapter 1703 Return of the Phantom Demon. Audio source, wuxia-world-audiobook.com. Chapter 1703 Return of the Phantom Demon. Translator, Nomyami. Editor, Nomyami. When he had other options available, he would always choose one of the other options, instead of directly chasing after an easier ambush. Jump. Time didn't permit Wuchi to think too much. He quickly made his decision. Even though circling around to the front was the most dependable way to ambush the enemy side, if the enemies left his sights for too long, he would have to guess when to attack. While he circled around to the front, it wasn't like the enemies couldn't change their minds and retreat. Air jump. Air jump was an assassin-only skill, allowing the character to make a second jump in the air. Jumping over the wall and onto the roof wasn't a problem, but when Cruel Silence leapt into the air and looked down from above, Wuchi was stunned. This building didn't have a roof. Wuchi hastily swung Cruel Silence's dagger. This sort of movement would affect his character's trajectory in the air, but it wouldn't have as large of an effect compared to, say, the recoil from a gunshot. Cruel Silence struggled in the air, but in the end, he wasn't able to land onto that tiny foothold at the top of the wall, and instead jumped right over it. Of course, he wouldn't take any fall damage. However, since he had gone up, he had to come down, which meant a bit of extra time. With this bit of delay, perhaps the other side would now have a ghost boundary waiting for him. Wuchi sighed. He didn't stop moving though. As soon as Cruel Silence landed, he jumped up again. Cruel Silence was now inside the building. He could see where all the footholds were located now. Air jump was a passive skill. It didn't have a cooldown, so Cruel Silence jumped again onto a foothold above. Again. He didn't rush out or continue forward. He simply jumped in place. His previous mistake had been because of his lack of understanding with this random map, but it could also be said that Wuchi hadn't thought his actions through. After Wuchi made the mistake, he immediately became more cautious. He didn't have Cruel Silence directly jump down. He didn't have Cruel Silence approach the edge either. He was afraid that if took one too many steps, he would step right into 1-inch Ash's ghost boundary. Now that he was up above, Wuchi could see 1-inch Ash below him. Sure enough, 1-inch Ash was casting a spell. Right when he jumped and looked down, 1-inch Ash finished his cast. The ghost god's power emanated from 1-inch Ash's snow stripe and flowed down. Wuchi was glad that he hadn't taken that step. However, when he saw the ghost boundary forming, Wuchi felt that it was a bit strange. If the ghost boundary had been set up to ambush him, wasn't the placement of the ghost boundary a bit too off? Yes, too off. The spectating pro players had noticed it as well. Because his goal isn't to attack, Li Xuan said. With this in mind, the players who thought that it was off immediately understood. Yes, the goal wasn't to attack. This ghost boundary wasn't to ambush Cruel Silence. This ghost boundary was defensive. Qiao Yivan also noticed Cruel Silence, looking down from above. But he had finished casting his ghost boundary. It couldn't be interrupted anymore. He let out a sigh of relief. After setting down this ghost boundary, he ignored Cruel Silence, and had 1-inch Ash leave. Wu Qi obviously wanted to give chase, but just when he was about to go do so, he suddenly realized how disgusting 1-inch Ash's placement of the ghost boundary was. 1-inch Ash wasn't far from Cruel Silence, but with this ghost boundary, it suddenly felt like he was looking at him from far away. If he wanted to chase after him, he would need to circle around the ghost boundary. Compared to this, the crumbling rooftop was cute. Even so, Wu Qi didn't hesitate. Cruel Silence continued to chase after 1-inch Ash. He circled around the ghost boundary, and could only watch as 1-inch Ash widened the distance between them. However, he didn't stop. Then, 1-inch Ash began casting another ghost boundary. The spectating pro players realized what Qiao Yivan was planning. He was very calm. He didn't forget himself because his previous play had given him a bit of an advantage. Even though he had a good opportunity to counterattack Wu Qi, he had chosen not to because his goal was clear. He wanted to get back to the rest of his team. Phantom Demons were most effective in group fights. Control the opponent's buff allies. Team battles were where Phantom Demons best put their abilities to use. His value to the team was worth much more than his individual battle strength. That was why, even though he had the opportunity, he had no intentions of fighting with Wu Qi. He was using this opportunity to hurry and reconvene with his team. That was why the ghost boundary that he placed down wasn't to attack, but to defend, to protect. Of course, if Wu Qi had ignored the ghost boundary and had Cruel Silence step right into it, Qiao Yivan would obviously give him a quick beating before leaving. Evidently, Wu Qi wasn't that stupid. Wu Qi's Cruel Silence circled around the ghost boundary. Samsara's fans were hoping for him to perform some sort of miracle act and break apart the ghost boundary set down by Qiao Yivan. But he didn't. Wu Qi seemed to be cooperating with Qiao Yifan's goals. From start to finish, he wasn't able to close the distance. Utilizing the terrain and his ghost boundaries, Qiao Yifan's 1-inch Ash was able to smoothly reconvene with his team. The pro players applauded. Qiao Yifan's utilization of the terrain and his class abilities were certainly worthy of praise, but the pro players were more appreciative of his clear-headed recognition of his role in the team. He was able to keep his calm, and remember what value he brought to the team as a whole. He had done everything in order to return and play his role as a support to the entire team. For a young player like him, this was truly a rare trait. As the pro players clapped, they couldn't help but turn their heads to look at the expressions of Tiny Herb's players. Everyone on Tiny Herb looked a bit uncomfortable. Qiao Yifan's eye-catching performance made him feel as if they were pandas trapped in a zoo. Right now, they could only look towards their captain because their captain was always calm and composed. But this time, they discovered that Wang Jiexi's expression wasn't very calm and composed. In fact, he looked rather serious. Even their captain was beginning to regret letting Qiao Yivan go. The Tiny Herb members looked at one another, especially at Zhou Yebai, their team's Ghost Blade player. He had originally been the person who cared most about this issue, but Wang Jiexi had dispelled those doubts earlier. But when he saw Wang Jiexi's expression now, his heart sank. "Captain," Zubin whispered to Wang Jiexi. He had joined Tiny Herb after Qiao Yivan left, so he didn't have the same thoughts as the others on Tiny Herb. However, he could tell that Qiao Yifan's outstanding performance was making the team uncomfortable. Before, Wang Jiexi was unaffected, so these negative emotions didn't have as much of an impact on the team. But now, even Wang Jiexi looked to be disturbed. Who knew how much of an impact this would have on the team, especially on Zhou Yebai? The pressure on him must be enormous. Pay attention to the match, Wang Jiexi said. The match. Everyone on Tiny Herb was stunned. It turned out that their captain hadn't been concerned with Qiao Yivan, but rather something in the match. The situation had become somewhat chaotic. Jiang Botao's Empty Waves had sent out wave slash after wave slash earlier, intending to create an opportunity for Du Ming to close in on Dancing Rain. Samsara was providing cover for their ally, but it wasn't like Happy didn't have anyone helping Su Mucheng. Yishu's Lord Grim turned fire in an attempt to intercept Du Ming. Even though Du Ming was able to avoid Lord Grim's attacks, Steamed Bun Invasion suddenly threw a brick at him for some inexplicable reason. Yes, for some inexplicable reason. Anyone could see that Steamed Bun Invasion had been completely focused on attacking one autumn leaf. If he had planned on turning away and providing help to that side, why would he do it from so far away? If he had done so earlier, he could have coordinated with Yishu, and the two of them would have likely been able to stop Du Ming's moon-luring frost. But he hadn't. Just when everyone thought that nothing was going to happen, a brick suddenly flew his way. Du Ming really hadn't been paying attention. Fortunately, he wasn't alone. Someone else on Samsara noticed the brick and warned him. Warning, react, move. In the end, Du Ming was able to avoid the brick. Seeing how much time Du Ming had to react to Steamed Bun's attack, it could be seen just how little of a threat that brick had been. But the entirety of Samsara had been given a fright. Pretend you were taking a higher-level math exam. All of the problems you encountered so far had been extremely difficult. Suddenly, an addition and subtraction problem was thrown at you to solve. According to common sense, this sort of problem shouldn't be appearing in the exam, and no one would have prepared for this sort of problem either. WuxaWorldAudio.com. No one was going to be stumped by such a simple problem, but it was enough to make everyone jump in surprise. After the initial surprise, all you had to do was answer the question. But this was a competitive match. If you didn't deal with the surprise properly, a brick might just hit you in the head. Du Ming hadn't thought that Steamed Bun would suddenly throw this sort of problem at him because there had been no need. An attack from Steamed Bun Invasion's position was no threat to him. For you to throw a brick from there, was it you being a noob? Or did you think I was a noob? Who knew what Steamed Bun was thinking? In any case, the brick had been thrown. If it weren't for Zhou Zekai's timely warning, who knew what would have happened? The battlefield was quite chaotic at the moment. All sorts of attacks and sounds could be heard. Du Ming may have likely missed the sound of the wind behind him. This brief fluster was enough to delay him. Yishu's Lord Grim hadn't been able to catch up at first, but with this delay, he had suddenly closed the distance. Du Ming had no time to close in on Dancing Rain, or take revenge on Steamed Bun. He had to fight off Lord Grim. Du Ming was now entangled with Yishu, and it suddenly put Jiang Botao in a bad position. He was throwing out wave slash after wave slash, but then it turned out that Du Ming's moon-luring frost wasn't able to do anything with it. Didn't that mean he was open right now? Dancing Rain aimed her cannon at him. Luckily, Zhou Zekai's Cloud Piercer helped out just in time to protect Empty Waves. At this moment, Qiao Yifan's 1-inch ash finally returned. A new variable had come into play. Qiao Yifan's Phantom Demon, with his powerful crowd control and AoE buffs, was definitely good news for Happy. Happy's supporters immediately brightened at this sight. The spectating pro players thought the same. They knew from experience how valuable a Phantom Demon was in a group battle. Moreover, Qiao Yivan had outstanding map and team awareness. With his addition, Happy was like a tiger with wings. Whether Samsara will be able to keep Qiao Yifan's 1-inch ash in check will be the deciding factor of this match, Li Xuan concluded. Of course, this might his bias towards phantom demons. At the very least, when he made this remark, quite a few people took exception to it. Whether Happy is able to protect 1-inch ash is also crucial, someone said. Isn't that the same as what I just said? Li Xuan pointed out. If Samsara need to keep Qiao Yifan in check, then Happy would want to stop him from achieving that. Wasn't it obvious? The two sides reacted extremely quickly. This time, Steamed Bun Invasion did something logical. He suddenly rushed towards Du Ming's moon luring Frost. Yishu's Lord Grimm seemed to have taken the baton, and retreated towards 1-inch ash. Cloud Piercer fired his dual guns, one gun to protect empty waves, the other to attack 1-inch ash. Lord Grimm's myriad manifestations umbrella opened. Qiao Yifan had acted as if he knew that someone would protect him. By the time the bullet was fired, he had already been casting a spell. Not waiting for Samsara to find a new angle of attack to interrupt him, he placed down the Ghost Boundary. Sword Boundary. Buff the team's strength and intelligence. Happy's combat power immediately soared to new heights, and this was just the beginning. Because of Qiao Yifan's return, Samsara was already beginning to lose their footing. They need to keep 1-inch ash in check no matter what. End chapter.